select what they see as the strongest project for these 2 awards. Those projects are then de-identified and are submitted to the Department Awards Committee for review. The Awards Committee carefully reviews all the submissions and then selects a single winner for each of the awards. The Stanley Krohmer Award is now in its 3rd year. This award is named in honor of Stan Krohmer, who taught as a senior affiliate faculty member in integrative studies for nearly 2 decades. Stan is a nationally award-winning painter and photographer. He's also a poet and, of course, a respected and valued teacher. The Krohmer Award recognizes senior projects that embody all that Stan is, especially his creative spirit. This year's Krohmer Award goes to Ivy Baillie. Ivy's project, as she already mentioned, is called Identity in Amateur Literature. Her work explores personal themes of identity and authenticity and draws deeply from private journals and pays homage to gifted writers whose work has not yet been published and may never be published more broadly. Congratulations again to Ivy and Amanda, and congratulations to anyone joining us today who's going to be graduating in the next year. I also want to give very special thanks to Professor Kate Fairman, who's one of the panelists, and also Professor Matt Missius, who I know is joining us as an attendee. Many of the students in Traverse City make it a point to write to the department to say how much it means to them to be able to work with Kate and with Matt, and what a positive difference they both have made in the lives and careers and studies of all of you as students. We're really lucky to have them both as faculty members in the IRIS department.
Thank you, Mel. And now, Mark, would you like to share some comments?
Well, yeah, delighted, in fact. I mean, this is so exciting to have an event that's not about budget. It's not about planning for our fall semester. It's not about all of the other stuff that we're talking about as faculty and administrators at Grand Valley State University. This is what it's about. Ivy and Amanda, why we're in this profession as faculty and administrators. So thank you, Shannon and colleagues, for putting this on. Thank you, faculty colleagues who are on this, for supporting these students to do this phenomenal work. And then you, Ivy and Amanda, I've not met you except on this Zoom meeting today, but it's so great to get a chance to hear about your work. And I mean that so much. This year, GVSU didn't have its annual sort of Allendale campus holiday, which is the Student Scholarship Day. None of us got to go and listen to what the cool things that students were doing. We didn't have our awards celebration to celebrate students like you in person. We didn't even have a commencement. In fact, I had to do a recorded Zoom, so at least I get to do live congratulations to the 2 of you. But it's not about me, it's about you 2 and all your colleagues and the faculty that are helping you get where you are in doing this great work. But you've done the work in this crazy year on your own with your talents and your persistence. And I'm really happy to be here. And thank you all for putting this on. And thanks for being great students and colleagues.
Great. Thank you. Now on to the main event. We're going to first start with a quick question for all of our audience members. If you could please respond to this question. Do you engage in personal writing? And select the one that most associated with your preference. So Ivy, hopefully that will give you some background here. And I'll turn it over to Kate so she can do an introduction.
Great. Well, of course, congratulations again are in order. And I have to say, I am just so proud of these 2 students. And I know each of you picked really meaningful projects and worked really hard on them. And so I am so excited to, have your work acknowledged with these awards. It's really thrilling. And I do want to say to both of you too, that it's really been an honor and a joy to have you as students, and had the pleasure of having both of you at least 2 courses, as well as being your advisor And it's just, you know, it's been lovely to see you move through this program. So I'm excited about that. So I'll first share a little bit about Ivy, and then of course Amanda before her presentation. But Ivy, I transferred to Grand Valley a few years ago, and had previously gone to the College of Creative Studies downstate, as well as Northwestern Michigan College. And I first met her in the introductory course for integrative studies, the Reflect, Connect, and Engage course. And it was immediately clear to me that Ivy is a beautiful writer and clearly an insightful thinker. And I've had Ivy actually in a few courses, in visionary thinker courses as well. And so I've had the joy of reading her work in a number of semesters, and really her contributions to the course and to her classmates in terms of insights have been really wonderful, and I'm very grateful for those contributions. Ivy, you know, I've been so impressed with what a deep reflective thinker she is. And I think she's really used her academic journey to not only develop her skills in writing, in which she took grant writing courses and, you know, writing in the discipline and creative writing courses, but she's really explored different content area. But in addition, she's kind of that, you know, true at heart, liberal education person who's explored her own self and really grown in terms of who she is and what she wants to do with her life, and that good life that we talk about in and oh, I see a little unstable, so I hope it doesn't go out. Willing to take a deep dive. I think she, you know, internship where she spent a summer at a yoga, did much of their promotional work and everything else under the sun. But that work, you know, even amidst the reflective, meditative atmosphere, was also with a tight group of people that surely, you know, had some discord, and I think she was able to reflect on that. And one of her strengths is really being able to take discordant ideas and weave them together and come out with some beautiful insights. And I think that's what your thesis project really shined in terms of taking those dissimilar ideas and bringing them together. And so, as Melanie mentioned, Ivy's project was, you know, I think very personally enriching for Ivy, bringing together her experience and inspiration with amateur literature and writing, and looking at ideas of identity and how some ideas of prolonged emerging adulthood and risk behavior and impacts of consumer culture and branding, and how those all kind of interweave for you. And so I truly think that creative spirit and that innovation came through in your work and in this project, as well as, you know, so many of your other work and projects. So I'm excited for you to share with us, and I won't say anything more, but thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ivy. Take it away.
Okay, well, thank you, Kate. That was a really beautiful and sweet introduction. I appreciate that. So I guess I want to start off by just thanking everyone for joining today. I haven't done anything like this before, so it's interesting, but I'm really happy that I get to talk about it with other people in the school. I know that my family's probably sick of me rehashing this over and over again, so it's nice to share it with people with some fresh ears. So like was previously mentioned, my project was on identity in amateur literature, and I definitely went through multiple like iterations of what the project was going to look like before it evolved into this final form. I knew that I wanted to do something with writing, and I also wanted to do something that was really personal and that kind of reflected, like Kate was saying, just my own journey in school, and how for me, my own academic journey has been very personal, and it definitely has coincided with a lot of internal growth and reflection. And I kind of wanted to pay homage to that in my final project. And also to mention before I dive into this, that I had pieces kind of gifted to me, and that was the main inspiration for this, and something that I delve into pretty deeply in my thesis project. Having a chapbook, which is a collection of poems that are unpublished, was given to me when I was a student at the College for Creative Studies. And it was written by a man called Braden Bell, who had passed away, and his friend was passing out his poetry. And it was something that was really deeply impactful and moving for me. And it felt really fitting that my senior thesis would kind of give an academic look at the validity of that kind of work. So identity for me was kind of a big part going into it. I was thinking a lot about authenticity and how I related to the work that was gifted to me, and then how I was able to kind of gain identity through my own writings. So actually a big part of this project, along with the academic research, was going through probably 15 different journals that I've written since high school, and reading through them and finding kind of bits and pieces that corresponded to some of the ideas that I was talking about. So as I went deeper into kind of learning about identity, especially how identity is formed at an early age, emerging adulthood kind of appeared as an important avenue to explore and to go down and to integrate into my thesis itself. So I knew that for me, in the reflection that I was doing, I was noticing kind of there was a lot of stressors about what, who am I? What is my identity? How do I find out what that is? And I found Jeffrey Arnett's research to be really enlightening in some of the questions I was having. Because emerging adulthood is something that is somewhat of a new phenomenon and is kind of due to shifting demographics. People aren't finding their whole identity maybe in a family or child rearing, different religious routes that maybe have been more common in the past, or careers are usually spread out a little bit more. And so for me, that was really powerful and kind of affirming my own stress with figuring out who I was in this stage. And it also kind of helped to orient the direction that I started to take my thesis. And because it is such an unstructured phase, I found in my research that it felt like this emerging adulthood, kind of the unstructured nature of it, and then that pressure to self-identify as something to kind of quell those anxieties, can often lead to self-branding. So the academic portion of my project kind of delved into this a little bit more as well, how identity is kind of learned through consumerism. And certainly as a young adult, I see this often, even in an academic setting, when you're kind of asked to brand yourself for, your LinkedIn profile or something like that, but also in a social space, through your social media, I often see my friends kind of have a cohesive identity and kind of are able to market themselves as a certain kind of person. And it was interesting to kind of reflect and to navigate that a little bit further, kind of understanding maybe psychoanalyzing what people get out of that kind of self-branding phenomenon. And this is kind of where my project started to delve a little bit more into authenticity, and when it became, when I started to realize that that was an important aspect for me, and why the whole self-branding concept was kind of something I was rejecting in my own research, was because it felt really inauthentic. And it felt like a way to kind of turn away from the self, and not delve deep into what the time that emerging adulthood offers us. And so I kind of started to ask, what was the nature of authentic identity? And in doing the reflection and in reading, it was really apparent that writing for me was a really powerful way to kind of discover the authenticity within myself. So that's kind of when I broke off into literature for more of my research. And like I had mentioned, it was more than just what does literature have to offer. I really wanted to analyze the concept of amateur literature, as well as the method in which it's shared, and how that can provide a much more authentic experience than reading a popular novel, for example. So the first area that I kind of explored a little bit was the author and the reader. And again, I was heavily referencing my own journals and the chapbook by Braden Bell to kind of discuss and analyze my relationship with either myself or with the author. And I noticed that especially with Bell's poetry, I felt a much deeper and personal connection to them because they were unpublished and because it felt really authentic. And I, was kind of delving into their personal life. And when I asked everyone kind of, what do you, if you engage in any personal writing, it was kind of to address that point, that special relationship that one gains when one writes a letter to someone, or, the fear of someone finding your own journal. And that's a lot of kind of what I was exploring, was those bonds that are created and how those bonds then transfer to our own personal growth and reflection. And like I had mentioned, I think in my research and in my personal experience, that in informal works like unpublished poems or journals or letters, that not only are the topics that are discussed much more personal and intimate, but that relationship is just more vulnerable because you're sharing a really deep part of yourself. And it was interesting in this project, not something I'd really mentioned much, but this was the first time that I had really used my own personal journals and writing as a way to kind of analyze what was going on. So it was a practice in vulnerability for me, and not only in writing it, but also sharing it with my classmates. I went through a lot of issues, like I said, of just the identity formation, of substance abuse. And so to be able to kind of process that in an academic way was just really healing and really revitalizing. And that was just a really cool part about this project in general. And then I love to write poetry, and I noticed in my journals and again in this chapbook that poetry was something I was drawn to. And so I wanted to analyze the poetry that I had been given or my own in a really literary and critical manner to kind of understand what it is about the prose itself that lends itself to a really authentic experience with the reader and the author. And I just kind of want to read this small passage from Mark Heterman's Poetry as a Contemplation of Being, where a poet's role is to move beyond the paralysis of everyday existence and to swim against the massive current which channels the waterway in the other direction. And I think that that last part really hits kind of the idea that I had found in poetry myself, was that it offered kind of an alternative to what I was experiencing or what I was reading a lot of at a certain time. So to have a really authentic and kind of new way of seeing things just helped to kind of instill, again, that vulnerability, that reflection in myself. And I kind of also wanted to go into the basis of amateur literature. So not just that relationship that one kind of gains, but also the structure of what makes amateur literature amateur, and not having a publishing house or an editor, and how that can kind of change the context and the meaning of the work that is produced. And, you know, because they don't go through those institutions, they remain more authentic, more unadulterated. But on the flip side, they aren't given academic validity. And I know that in kind of the library sphere, there is a lot of conversation about how to include unpublished works or self-published works into a library. And I felt that in doing this project that I was offering space for amateur literature to kind of shine in its academic validity. And that was really important for me, especially with Belle's work, because it had felt so powerful that it was shared with me, that I felt like in it being given to me, I was kind of given the opportunity to really praise this man that I had never met and that passed away before I had ever read his work. But it was a really surreal thing for me to be working so closely with his poetry and to know that he would never know that it had touched someone so much. And kind of in that sense, I wanted to go my own direction with that, and in a way to respect Belle's vulnerability with putting his self down in this book of poetry. I wanted to make my own chapbook. So I finished my thesis with a small chapbook that had a poem or a small piece of writing from every year after I graduated high school. So I think that there's about 6 pieces in there. And again, that was a really scary portion of this whole experience, because I explored, you know, really intimate issues of addiction, and to share that with my family once I had finished my thesis project. I wasn't initially planning on it, but then when I won the award, I felt compelled to do so. And that was just so good. Again, this whole experience felt like, you know, a practice in vulnerability and kind of putting myself down on the page. And for me, that was really special. And I took a big jump of faith and I put it online on my website. So again, I just wanted to kind of experience that same kind of practice what I preach, I suppose, which wasn't as easy as I had thought. So. But yeah, that's just kind of an overview of my thesis. If you are interested in reading it in full, you can go onto my website, which is just my full name, ivybaillie.com, and it's there along with the chapbook at the end. So
Great, thank you, Ivy.
Yeah.
So what we'd like to do now is open it up for a couple questions. If you would like to ask Ivy a question, there will be some more time later, but I just want to open it up with the question and answer or Q&A feature at the bottom. Ivy, the question is, what class prepared you or helped you with this project?
I mean, I think that there were multiple classes that helped kind of form my direction for it. I would say that Matt's class that I took on research, integrative research, was really useful, and kind of gave me the confidence to be able to explore something in a really academic way. And that was definitely a challenge for me, because I knew I wanted to present something academically, but I also wanted to weave in my own writing. And I think that definitely in that class, I was able to kind of experience what that would look like. But certainly, I mean, you know, the project was kind of meant to stand as a coalescing of kind of every class I had taken in a way. I mean, that may be a easy out answer, but it is the truth. I mean, you know, even from my first class that I took with Kate, learning kind of how to analyze the self and to question one's path and ideas and ideologies, that was really powerful. And definitely those skills that I learned transferred over into making this project something that I'm proud of.
Anyone in the panel have something that they'd like to add or ask Ivy?
I want to know if you're going to continue to write, Ivy.
Yes, I am. That's definitely my goal. Ever since high school, I was like, I had a teacher pull me aside and was like, you have to be published. And, you know, writing, and something I explored more in depth in this, is that writing definitely has always been a part of my identity. And when I was struggling with substance abuse, that it wasn't a part of my identity anymore. And that was really painful for me to feel like I love to write, and there was a part of me that knew I was a writer, but I didn't identify as such. And, you know, kind of to get back into the practice of it and to graduate with kind of my concentration now being in writing and advocacy, it's been a really affirming experience without a doubt. But that is definitely where I'm headed in the future. I mean, I love to be authentic and open, so it's kind of hard for me to want to pay the bills or do grant writing or stuff like that, because I mean, I would love to have the freedom to just be a creative writer and to do my own projects. So that's definitely the direction I want to go. Yes.
So maybe that answers the next question. What are your plans for the future?
Yes, somewhat. My whole college experience has been somewhat untraditional. So it's been about 6 years since I started college, and have taken a lot of time off. So to finally finish it, guns a-blazing, I'm really excited to reward myself with some traveling. So I love to travel by myself and to backpack. I went on a really special backpacking trip in Wales when I was 17 by myself. And that is what is in my immediate future in September when I graduate. And then after I have kind of a month of reprieve, I'll kind of be ready to start my next chapter.